You reach for your phone the second your eyes open. You scroll for 10 minutes before your feet hit the floor. You check your inbox while brushing your teeth, scan headlines while making coffee, and by the time you actually start your day, you've already consumed more information than your grandparents saw in a week. And yet somehow, you still can't finish a single book. Your nightstand is a graveyard of good intentions. 3 books deep, bookmarks haven't moved in months. You buy another one anyway because this time will be different. This time you'll make it happen. But then life gets busy. Netflix releases something new, and that book joins the others gathering dust. If you have time to scroll for 3 hours, why don't you have time to read for 30 minutes? If your brain can binge an entire season in a weekend, why does 20 pages feel impossible? You think it's a time problem. You think you're just too busy, too distracted, too tired at the end of the day. But what if it's not about time at all? What if your brain has been trained by every notification, every autoplay, every infinite scroll to reject the exact conditions reading requires? And what if, right now, every time you try to read and can't focus, you're actually strengthening the neural pathway that makes reading harder? Researchers at the University of Washington discovered that when we switch between tasks, part of our attention stays stuck on the previous activity instead of fully transferring to the new one. They call this attention residue. Your scrolling isn't just wasting time, it's making your brain physically incapable of sustaining the focus reading demands. If you could see what's happening in your brain right now, would you still think you just need to try harder? The truth is, reading a book a week has nothing to do with reading faster or finding more time. It's about understanding how attention actually works, and then building a system that works with your brain instead of fighting it. Once you understand this, everything changes. But here's what you need to know, and what shifts once you understand it. Your brain's habit system can work for you or against you, but it can't stay neutral. And right now, it's working against reading, and today, that's exactly what we're going to rewire. So here's how we'll do it, step by step, starting with just 10 pages. We'll break down the 3 hidden forces that are sabotaging your ability to focus on anything longer than a tweet. Then we'll dive into the neuroscience of why your current approach to reading is actually making the problem worse. And finally, I'll give you 6 research-backed strategies that make reading not just possible, but inevitable. Methods used by people who read 50+ books a year while working full-time jobs. This isn't about speed reading or blocking out your entire weekend. This is about understanding how your attention actually works, so you can stop fighting your brain and start using it. By the end, you'll know exactly how to build a reading system so natural that not reading starts to feel strange. You'll understand why the conventional advice doesn't work, and you'll have specific practical methods you can use starting today. Think of your attention like water. Right now, it's being pulled in 1,000 directions, shallow, scattered, constantly evaporating before it can gather depth. Reading requires you to become a river instead of a puddle, flowing in one direction with momentum that builds on itself. But how do we know this isn't just philosophy? Because researchers spent decades studying exactly what happens in your brain when you try and fail to read. In 2009, Sophie Leroy, a business professor at the University of Minnesota, ran a series of experiments that changed how we understand attention. She discovered that when people switch from one task to another, their attention doesn't immediately follow. A residue of their attention remains stuck thinking about the original task. This is especially thick when the first task was left unfinished or involved low-intensity multitasking. She called this phenomenon attention residue, and it explains why you can't focus after scrolling through your phone. Then Cal Newport at Georgetown University demonstrated that to produce at your peak level, You need to work for extended periods with full concentration on a single task, free from distraction. He studied high performers across multiple fields and found they all protected long blocks of uninterrupted focus time. The attention residue left by unresolved task switches, like seeing emails you can't deal with right now, dampens your performance on everything that follows. And here's where it gets fascinating. B.J. Fogg at Stanford's Behavior Design Lab discovered that habits aren't formed through repetition alone. They're formed through emotion, specifically through feeling successful. When you do a new behavior and feel successful, you wire it into your brain's automatic systems. This is why trying to force yourself to read for 2 hours fails, but reading for 10 minutes can become automatic. This isn't about willpower. It's about working with how your brain actually builds habits instead of against it. So your attention has residue clinging to it from everything you did before trying to read. Your brain hasn't learned to associate reading with feeling successful, and you're trying to force deep focus in a system designed for constant interruption. This is what you've been experiencing. You can see this pattern in your own life every single day. You sit down with your book, genuinely ready this time, but within 3 pages, you realize you haven't absorbed a single word. You've been reading the same paragraph 4 times, and your mind is somewhere else entirely. Thinking about that email you need to send, the conversation from earlier, what you're going to eat for dinner. Reading has become an exercise in dragging your attention back to the page over and over again, like trying to hold water in your hands. Then there's the transition problem. You close Instagram and immediately try to read. But research has found that when people are interrupted and have to switch tasks under time pressure, they show both high levels of attention residue and significant performance decrements on the new task. Your brain is still processing the 15 micro stories you just consumed, the comparison triggers, the dopamine hits. You're not bringing a clear mind to reading. You're bringing the scattered aftermath of digital consumption. It's like trying to hear a whisper in a room where someone just turned off heavy metal. The silence is there, but your ears are still ringing. But here's the pattern most people never notice. Every failed reading attempt teaches your brain something. When you sit down to read and can't focus, when you feel frustrated and put the book down, when you choose your phone instead, you're not just wasting that moment. You're training your brain that reading is associated with failure, with discomfort, with something you can't do. Your brain's habit system learns from these emotional experiences. And right now, it's learning that reading feels bad. And here's what makes this cycle so insidious. You don't have the space to read anymore. Not physical space, mental space. Your brain struggles to perform when too many windows are running at once, just like an early computer would slow down or crash. You've trained yourself to keep a dozen tabs open in your mind at all times. Unfinished tasks, pending notifications, things you need to remember to do. Reading requires closing all those tabs, and your brain has forgotten how to do that. Even when you're alone with a book, your mind is crowded with everything you're not doing. The mental real estate reading needs has been subdivided into tiny plots, each one occupied by something urgent and unfinished. Then there's what happens to time itself. You look at a 300-page book and see an insurmountable mountain. Your brain calculates, that's probably 10 hours. I don't have 10 hours. So you don't start. But you'll spend those same 10 hours across 3 days scrolling, watching, clicking. The time exists. It's just being allocated in 5-minute increments to activities that require no warm-up, no sustained attention, no delayed gratification. Reading has become the vegetables you know you should eat while everything else is cotton candy engineered to dissolve instantly on your tongue. Your brain has been optimized for the quick hit, and reading is a slow burn. And underneath all of this is the erosion of your capacity for sustained attention itself. If you're not comfortable going deep for extended periods of time, it becomes difficult to get your performance to peak levels. Like any skill, the ability to focus atrophies when you don't use it. Every notification you check trains your brain to expect interruption. Every time you switch tasks mid-flow, you weaken the neural pathways that support sustained concentration. You're not just struggling to read this one book, you're watching your cognitive ability to engage deeply with anything slowly crumble. And the scariest part? It feels normal. It feels like this is just who you are now. This isn't your fault. You're not broken, and you don't lack discipline. You've just been swimming in an environment that's systematically rewiring your brain for the exact opposite of what reading requires. But why does this happen? What's actually going on in your brain that makes reading feel impossible? The answer is both simpler and more profound than you think. And understanding it is the first step toward getting your reading life back. Let's start with what your brain evolved to do. For most of human history, survival depended on scanning your environment for threats and opportunities. Your ancestors who could quickly shift attention from gathering berries to spotting a predator survived. Your ancestors who got absorbed in contemplation for an hour straight became lunch. Your brain is the descendant of the alert, the distractible, the constantly scanning. Deep, sustained focus on abstract symbols for extended periods? That's not what evolution prepared you for. That's a recent cultural invention your brain is trying to execute using ancient hardware. And here's the cruel irony. Your brain resists behaviours that feel difficult or require willpower. When something takes effort, your brain labels it as unpleasant and makes it less likely you'll do it again. Reading, in your current state, takes enormous effort. Every time you try to focus and struggle, every time you realise you've read a page without comprehension, your brain is encoding. This is hard. This doesn't feel good. But behaviours that make you feel successful wire themselves into your automatic systems. The scroll that delivers instant novelty, the video that requires no ramp up, those feel effortless, so your brain wants more. Now add the modern digital environment, which is engineered with precision to hijack these exact vulnerabilities. Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered in 1885 that without reinforcement, people forget most new information within days, up to 50 to 70% within the first 24 hours. Your brain is designed to let go of information that doesn't get used, and in the digital age, you're consuming thousands of pieces of information daily, almost none of which get revisited or reinforced. You're training your brain to be a sieve, not a reservoir. The information flows through you without leaving a trace. When you try to read a book, which asks you to hold complex ideas across hours and days, you're asking a sieve to become a bucket. But there's a deeper mechanism at play. Psychologist Peter Gollwitzer at NYU discovered that people fail to follow through on intentions not because they lack motivation, but because they haven't specified when, where, and how they'll act. You have the goal intention. I want to read more. But you don't have an implementation intention, no specific trigger, no predetermined response. So every time you have a free moment, your brain has to make a fresh decision. Should I read now? Where's my book? Is this a good time? That decision-making process creates friction, and when there's friction, your brain defaults to what's easiest, which is never reading. Gollwitzer found that when people formed if-then plans, like, if I sit down with morning coffee, then I will read for 10 minutes, they bypass the need for in-the-moment willpower. The behaviour becomes automatic, triggered by the situation itself. But most people never create these implementation intentions for reading. They just hope they'll find the time and motivation. They're setting themselves up to fail at the neurological level. And here's what locks the whole pattern in place. The gap between your intention and your action creates a sense of failure. You wanted to read, you didn't. Your brain registers this as evidence that you're not a reader, that reading isn't for you, that something is wrong with you. This emotional residue, this feeling of being someone who doesn't finish books, becomes part of your identity. You start to believe the story your failed attempts tell about who you are, and that belief makes the next attempt even harder. The truth is, you're not failing at reading. You're succeeding perfectly at being a human brain in an environment designed to make reading nearly impossible. Your attention residue, your lack of implementation intentions, your association of reading with failure, your sieve-like information processing. None of this is a personal failing. It's a predictable response to predictable conditions. But the moment you realize this, something shifts. Because if the problem is systematic, the solution can be too. This is what you've been up against. An ancient brain trying to perform a modern cognitive feat in an environment engineered to prevent exactly that. But the moment you realize the game you're actually playing, you can change the rules. Understanding the system means you can redesign it. And when you align your environment with how your brain actually works, instead of fighting it, reading becomes inevitable. It won't always be easy, but it can be simple. Here's how. Start with the simplest practice, the 10-page rule. Not 10 minutes, 10 pages. Fogg's research at Stanford shows that when you make a behavior tiny and attach it to something you already do, it becomes automatic. 10 pages takes maybe 8 minutes. That's it. You're not trying to read a whole book. You're trying to create one moment where your brain feels successful at reading. Here's how it works in practice. Link those 10 pages to something you already do every day. After I pour my morning coffee, I read 10 pages before I check my phone. That's it. The coffee is your trigger. The phone checking is your insurance policy. You will get to check it, but not until after 10 pages. Gollwitz's research on implementation intentions shows that this if-then format makes behaviors automatic. You don't have to decide each morning whether to read. The decision is already made. Coffee means reading. And here's what makes this magical. 10 pages feels achievable. You finish them. And when you finish them, you feel successful. That feeling of success is what wires reading into your brain as an automatic behavior. You're not white-knuckling through 2 hours. You're creating a daily win that your brain wants to repeat. Most days, you'll keep reading past 10 pages because you're already in flow. But even if you don't, you've won. 10 pages a day is 3,650 pages a year. That's roughly 15 books. From 10 pages. Once you've established that trigger, add what I call the attention reset ritual. Leroy's research showed that when people take just 1 minute before switching tasks to plan where they'll resume the interrupted task, they significantly reduce attention residue. Before you sit down to read, take 90 seconds to close the open loops in your mind. Write down the 3 things you're thinking about. Email to Sarah. Groceries, call about appointment, getting them out of your head and onto paper signals to your brain. These are handled. You can let them go now. This isn't meditation, this is cognitive housekeeping. You're giving your brain permission to stop holding those tasks in active memory. Creating this ready-to-resume plan before reading helps you cognitively set aside the interrupted tasks. Try this right now if you're currently thinking about something you need to do later. Write it down. Notice how your mind immediately feels clearer. That's the technique. Do it every time before reading. Here's the technique that changes everything for retention. Read with a pen, not to take exhaustive notes. To mark moments that spark recognition. When something surprises you, circle it. When you disagree, put a question mark in the margin. When an idea connects to something you already know, draw a line to the margin and write 1 word. Ebbinghaus discovered that information is easier to recall when it's built upon things you already know, and that active recall, pulling information from memory, flattens the forgetting curve more than passive review. You're not trying to memorize the book, you're creating anchor points. Later, When you think about what you read, those physical marks become retrieval cues. You remember, oh, there was that part I circled, and suddenly the whole section comes back. You're working with your brain's natural memory systems instead of against them. Another powerful practice: stack your books strategically. Don't just have one book going, have 3, each serving a different mental state. One book that requires focus and makes you think, your morning coffee book. One book that's engaging but lighter, your wind-down book before bed. One book that's pure pleasure, your anytime book that lives in your bag. Why does this work? Because some days your brain has the bandwidth for challenge. Some days it doesn't. If your only option is the hard book and you're mentally exhausted, you won't read at all. But if you have the light novel waiting, you'll read that instead. Reading anything is always better than reading nothing. You're removing the all or nothing trap that kills most reading habits. And you're training your brain that reading fits every mood, every energy level, every situation. Now let's address the environment. Fogg calls this the ability factor in behaviour change. Making the behaviour easier to do increases the likelihood it happens. Put a book in every room where you wait. One by the coffee maker, one by your favourite chair, one in the bathroom, one in your bag. You're not trying to read all of them simultaneously. You're removing friction. The next time you have 3 minutes, you don't have to go find a book. There's already one within arm's reach. And here's the subtle magic. Seeing books around your space sends a signal to your brain about who you are. This is a person who reads. Your environment is constantly teaching your brain what's normal, what's expected, what's possible. When books are visible and accessible, reading becomes part of your identity at a subconscious level. Here's the linguistic reframe that unsticks people. Stop saying, I don't have time to read. Start saying, I haven't made reading the priority yet. The first statement is a fact about the universe. Time is scarce, immovable, beyond your control. The second is a fact about your choices. Priorities are flexible, changeable, within your control. This isn't semantics. Your brain responds differently to these framings. One triggers helplessness, one triggers agency, and agency is what lets you build a reading life. Finally, protect your reading from your phone like your life depends on it, because your attention does. Research shows that the mere presence of your phone reduces your cognitive capacity, even when it's off and face down. Put it in another room. Not on silent on the table, in another room. Every notification, even ones you don't check, creates a micro-interruption in your focus. Your brain registers something happened and has to actively suppress the urge to look. That suppression takes energy you need for reading. Try this. Before your reading session, put your phone somewhere that requires you to stand up and walk to get it. That 10-second barrier is enough. In the moment when you feel the urge to check, you have to make a conscious choice to get up and walk. Most of the time, you won't. You'll stay with your book, and every time you stay, you're strengthening the neural pathway that makes sustained attention possible. These strategies aren't about reading faster or magically finding more time. They're about redesigning the conditions so reading becomes the path of least resistance. When you help yourself do what you already want to do by making it easier, behaviour change becomes almost inevitable. The goal isn't to become someone who reads 3 hours a day. The goal is to become someone who reads 10 pages every day, no matter what. And in doing that, you become someone who reads. This work isn't easy, and we're not pretending it is. You're rewiring years of conditioning, rebuilding neural pathways that have atrophied, creating new identity patterns in a culture designed to keep you scrolling. Some days, the 10 pages will feel effortless. Some days they'll feel like climbing a mountain. Both are part of the process. You're not failing when it's hard, you're succeeding at something difficult. And that's where all meaningful change lives, in the sustained discomfort of becoming different than you were. I'm curious, which of these strategies feels most doable for you right away? And which one makes you think there's no way that would work for me? Drop a comment. I read every single one, and I'm genuinely interested in what resonates and what creates resistance, because that resistance is information about what your specific brain needs. And if this helped you understand why reading has felt impossible, if any of this made you think, oh, that's what's been happening, send this to someone who's been beating themselves up about the same thing. You might be giving them permission to stop seeing it as a personal failing and start seeing it as a solvable design problem. If you want more on building systems that actually stick instead of relying on willpower, subscribe. That's what this whole channel is about. Understanding how your brain actually works so you can stop fighting yourself. Tomorrow morning, try just one thing. Pick your trigger moment, coffee, lunch break, before bed, and put your book right there. Open to your bookmark, 10 pages, that's all. Don't think about finishing the book or meeting some annual goal. Just 10 pages. Feel what it's like to finish them. That feeling is your brain learning. I can do this. Reading is something I do. And from that feeling, everything else becomes possible. The books aren't going anywhere. They'll still be there when you're ready. And you're more ready than you think.